The village of Duro sat where the wind always seemed to carry more dust than rain. Houses leaned into each other, built from cracked clay and patched straw, and every morning a fine gray powder clung to the faces of its people. Hunger lived there like a shadow, food was measured by handfuls and every grain was cherished. Amara, though, carried herself as if she were born of gentler earth. Her voice was soft but steady, her hands patient. Each dawn she rose before the roosters and went to the stream, carrying her gourd with quiet grace. She washed, prayed beneath the bending trees, and returned with water that shimmered as though it carried more life than any other. Her stepmother, Naki, watched her with narrowing eyes. Naki's own daughters were often careless, spilling flour, sleeping past sunrise, snapping at each other like restless dogs. But Amara never raised her voice. Even when her food was the smallest share, she would eat without complaint, thanking the spirits of grain as though she had feasted. And that gentleness, that quiet light, filled Naki with a bitterness that grew daily. "Why do they greet her before me?" Naki muttered when the neighbors bowed their heads to Amara at the market. "Why do they say she has her mother's grace? Grace does not fill the stomach. Grace does not build a roof." Yet the words were sour in her mouth, for deep down she knew it was not grace alone. It was that the village seemed to trust Amara more than her. The drought had worsened by then. The riverbed cracked, leaving only thin streams that glistened like dying snakes. Harvests failed, animals weakened. Fear bred whispers, and whispers bred superstition. People spoke of spirits that tested households, blessing the pure and punishing the corrupt. Some claimed they had seen pale figures in the dust storms, others heard strange hums from the hills at night. In such times, every gesture was watched. If someone's pot shattered, neighbors asked who had spoken cruel words that day. If a child fell ill, they asked who had hidden jealousy in her heart. And always, when Naki's daughters quarreled in the streets, when Naki herself snapped and scolded, the elders would turn their gaze toward Amara, quiet, watchful Amara, and shake their heads as if to say, "This one holds the peace of the house, not them." By the fire at night, Amara would sit with the youngest children of the compound, telling them small stories her late mother had taught her. Tales of birds who brought rain, of pots that sang when filled with honest food, of rivers that remembered kindness. The children leaned against her knees, eyes wide, forgetting hunger for a while. And though her own stomach often nodded with emptiness, she would smile and hush them to sleep, carrying their dreams as gently as she carried water. But in the shadows, Naki's gaze never softened. Her envy grew heavier with every word of praise Amara earned, every glance of trust she received from the elders. To Naki, kindness was no blessing, it was a weapon. And she began to wonder how long the girl's light could burn before it was smothered. The village of Duro, already starved of rain, was about to learn that envy could dry a house faster than any sun. The days stretched long in Duro, each one carrying the same thin taste of dust and fear. In those days, envy was as common as thirst, but it was sharpest inside Amara's own home. Her stepmother Naki's resentment grew like a hidden thorn. To outsiders she spoke with smiles, but her heart twisted each time she heard Amara's name spoken with respect. It was never the names of her own daughters that the elders mentioned, never their hands they praised for neat weaving or careful gathering. Always Amara, Amara who filled her calabash without spilling, Amara who sang softly to calm children, Amara whose footsteps were said to bring luck to the field she crossed. At first, the jealousy was small, only bitter mutters at night. Naki would whisper to her daughters as they sat by the fire. "Do you see how she fools them? Acting so humble, always bowing her head. The people love her because she pretends. If you were clever, you would watch her and copy her ways." But the daughters, Lami and Suri, were restless and proud. They laughed instead. "She is no trickster, mother," Lami scoffed. "She is simply too quiet to fight. The villagers pity her like one pities a stray goat." "Then why do the elders trust her?" Naki pressed, her voice harsh. "Why do they ask her opinion even when men sit in council? That is not pity, it is power. And it should belong to us." So the mutters became sharper, feeding the daughters' disdain. Soon they no longer looked at Amara as a sister, but as a rival standing between them and honor. The house grew tense. If Amara gathered firewood, Lami would snatch the bundle and claim it as her own. If Amara prepared food, Suri would scatter the herbs and say she had spoiled it. Naki did not stop them. Instead she fanned the fire. "Do not let her outshine you," she urged. "A stepdaughter cannot be allowed to rise higher than blood." The roots of this bitterness went deeper than daily chores. In Duro, inheritance was a fragile subject. Land was divided by sons, but honor was carried by daughters. Their marriages, their skills, their reputations. A daughter who brought shame diminished her house, while one who brought respect lifted it. And though Amara was only the child of Naki's late husband's first wife, her quiet strength made others forget she was not truly of Naki's blood. Whispers in the market stung the most. "That girl Amara," women would say as they ground millet. "If only she belonged to my house. She would keep peace in any compound." Naki heard such words until they pressed on her skull like stones. Her own daughters, though older, seemed always overlooked. Their weaving frayed at the edges, their tempers flared too quickly, and their laughter carried mockery instead of grace. Even suitors passed them by. "Pretty but sharp-tongued," one young man muttered after Suri's outburst, shaking his head. Shame turned to bitterness and bitterness to plotting. Naki's heart whispered to her at night, a cruel voice that grew louder each time Amara endured her cruelty with silence. If she were gone, the villagers would see only your daughters. If she stumbled, they would not call her blessed. Why let her starve you of honor? The household air became heavy with this unseen poison. Amara felt it but did not name it. She moved with the same patience, bowing her head, carrying out her duties. Yet in her chest, unease stirred like a bird trapped in a basket. Her brothers by blood were gone, her father in the grave. Only Naki and her daughters remained, and their eyes no longer held the warmth of kinship but the sharp glint of knives. The drought outside pressed the village hard, but inside Amara's home, another drought was forming, of kindness, of love, of mercy. And though no one yet spoke of it aloud, the silence carried the weight of an approaching storm. The Festival of Embers was the only time of year when the drought-stricken village tried to remember joy. Long ago, the elders said, fire had been a gift from the mountain spirits, a promise that even when rains failed, warmth and light would remain. Each dry season, the people gathered in the central clearing, carrying coals from their home hearths to feed the great fire. If the fire lived till dawn, they believed the spirits would keep watching over them. This year the drought had bitten deeper than ever. Cracked fields stretched like scars beyond the village. The goats bleated weakly, their ribs sharp as thorns. But still, the people prepared, stringing dried gourds along ropes, sweeping dust from the square, and painting their faces with ashes to honor the spirits of flame. Children laughed as they chased each other with tiny torches, and women clapped their hands in rhythm while the drums began to sound. Amara, as always, carried her family's ember with great care. She cupped it in a clay dish lined with leaves, walking slowly so the wind would not snuff it out. The villagers watched her pass, some murmuring blessings, for she had never once let her family's flame die on the long walk to the festival grounds. Her stepmother, Naki, stood back, lips pressed thin. She carried no ember of her own. She had given the task to Suri, but the girl's flame had already gone out in the restless wind. "Clumsy hands," the villagers whispered, shaking their heads. By contrast, Amara's coal glowed brightly, sheltered in her steady palms. When the fire circle was lit, the drums thundered. Men leaped through the air, women spun with skirts like burning petals, and sparks rose into the sky as if the stars themselves were joining. Around the flames, the people sang old songs, their voices carrying across the cracked earth. In the middle of this joy, one of the elders lifted Amara's coal high before placing it onto the great fire. The ember caught quickly, flames rising strong where others had faltered. The elder raised his staff and declared, "Her hands keep the spirit alive when even the wind tries to kill it. Let her be an example to all of us." Cheers erupted. Children clapped. Women ululated. Some men pounded their chests. And Amara, caught in the glow, bowed her head, her cheeks burning from the attention. But Naki's heart shriveled at the sight. Her own daughters stood stiff, their eyes dark with shame. Lami whispered furiously, "It is always her. Always her name they speak." Suri hissed, "They treat her as though she were chosen. What will become of us if this continues?" The fire roared, throwing shadows across the crowd. And in those shadows Naki's envy hardened. Her thoughts twisted cruel. If the people believe she carries the spirit's favor, then she will rise above us all. If she is lifted, we will be cast down. She leaned close to her daughters, her voice sharp beneath the music. "You see now, don't you? So long as she stands, you will remain in her shadow. She must be cast out. She must fall." The drums beat louder, drowning out their whispers, but the hatred in their eyes burned as fiercely as the flames in the clearing. That night, while the village danced around the fire, laughter chasing sparks into the star-scattered sky, a darker fire was lit inside one family's heart. A fire of jealousy that would not be quenched until it consumed. The festival's echoes still lingered in the village when the betrayal began to take shape. For 3 days after the fire had died, people spoke of Amara's coal, how it had burned bright and caught the flame as if the spirits themselves had kissed it. Some said it was a sign that she carried blessings meant to heal Duro. Others murmured that such favor was dangerous, for when the spirits lifted one person too high, others often fell. Naki heard it all, every word like stones thrown at her chest. Her daughters, humiliated by whispers of their clumsiness, fed her rage. Even children mock us now, Suri spat one evening. They say, you cannot even keep a coal alive, better let Amara do it for you. Lami's eyes smoldered. If this continues, no man will want us. No elder will call our names. We will always walk behind her. Naki's lips pressed into a thin, cruel line. Then we must make her stumble so she cannot walk ahead. The plan was spoken softly, under the dim glow of their hearth, as though the shadows themselves might overhear. They would not strike her in the village, where eyes and ears were sharp. No, they would lure her where no one could see, into the mountains where the sacred trees grew and the earth kept secrets. On the fourth evening, Lami approached Amara with feigned sweetness. Sister, she said, her voice syrupy, the elders spoke of gathering wood for the next season. They say the trees near the mountain cave are strongest, blessed by spirits. Will you walk with us? We wish to carry our share as you do. Amara, surprised by their sudden warmth, hesitated only a moment. Her heart, ever eager to believe kindness, softened. If you truly wish to gather, I will go with you. The path is steep, but we will walk together. The sun dipped low as they set out, baskets on their backs. The air smelled of dry grass, the sky streaked in crimson. Shadows stretched long across the earth, swallowing the last of the light. Amara walked ahead, steady as always, while her stepsisters exchanged sharp glances behind her. When they reached the mouth of the cave, Suri's voice trembled with false reverence. Here, sister, this is the place. The wood is near. Amara bent to peer into the shadows, her fingers brushing the cool stone. In that moment, rough hands shoved her from behind. She stumbled, crying out, her basket crashing to the ground. Before she could rise, Naki herself stepped from the trees, carrying a slab of stone with Lami at her side. Together they heaved it toward the entrance. Amara's voice rang out desperate, Mother! Sisters! Why do you? But the heavy rock thundered down, sealing the cave mouth in darkness. Her cries echoed inside, thin and fading, muffled by the stone. Outside, the women stood panting, their hands scratched, their breaths quick. The forest was silent but for the distant call of an owl. Let her vanish, Naki whispered, her voice trembling with triumph and fear. The village will believe she wandered into the hills and lost her way. The spirits will claim her and no one will question us. Lami and Suri nodded, though unease flickered in their eyes. They turned back toward the village as the last light drained from the sky, leaving behind a cave that now held more than stone and silence. It held betrayal, buried deep as the night. And when they returned home empty-handed, the people asked where Amara had gone. Naki pressed her hand to her lips, feigning sorrow. She went to gather wood, she murmured, and did not return. The village believed. But the cave knew the truth. Inside the cave, silence pressed against Amara like a second skin. At first, she clawed at the stone, her nails scraping raw, her voice echoing in ragged cries. Let me out. Please. But no answer came, only the slow drip of water deep within and the rustle of unseen wings. Her throat burned from calling, and soon even her sobs grew hoarse. Darkness thickened until it seemed alive. She could not tell day from night, only that her body ached with hunger and thirst, her lips cracked, her knees bruised from the uneven stone. Fear curled in her chest like a serpent. Fear of never seeing the sky again, of her bones rotting in this cold tomb, of the silence swallowing her name forever. But memory began to stir. In the hush between her gasps, she recalled the tales her mother had told when she was a child sitting close to the fire. Stories of spirits that dwelled in stone, of voices that whispered to those abandoned, of flames that flickered in impossible places. At the time, she had thought them only songs to keep her from fearing the night. Now, those words returned like threads of light in her darkness. She pressed her back against the wall, eyes closed, and began to murmur them aloud. Stone has memory. Flame has voice. Those who endure will be answered. Her whisper was faint, but it steadied her trembling. Hunger gnawed at her belly, twisting it in painful knots. Once she found a trickle of water dripping along the wall and cupped it in her hands, drinking as if it were the sweetest gift. Still, her body weakened. At times she thought she felt the cool brush of her mother's hand across her forehead, though no one was there. Other times she swore she saw faint flickers, tiny sparks dancing along the cracks in the rock like fireflies. She told herself they were only dreams. Yet the more she watched, the more the flickers grew. They painted shifting shapes across the stone, tongues of flame, curling and retreating. Once, when she stretched out her hand, the sparks flared brighter as if answering her. Fear gave way to wonder and wonder to resolve. "If there are spirits here," she whispered, her voice steadier now, "then I will not die begging. If they test me, I will endure. If they give me fire, I will carry it." Her dreams grew sharper. In one, she walked through halls of stone where fires burned without wood, their light painting faces on the walls. In another, she stood at the mouth of the river, but her shadow did not follow her, only flames. Each time she woke, her hands felt warm though the cave air was cold. The loneliness never left, but it no longer broke her. She began to treat it as company. She spoke to the stone, to the shadows, even to her hunger. "I see you," she would murmur. "You will not take me." And the sparks seemed to listen, flickering gently as though in reply. What began as terror was slowly becoming something else. Not comfort, never comfort, but a strange sharpening, as though the darkness itself was shaping her into something new. Her cries no longer echoed in despair but in defiance. Her silence no longer felt like a tomb but like a waiting ground. The girl who had once bowed her head and endured quietly was still inside her. But alongside her, rising like a flame from dry wood, was someone else, someone who would not remain buried. The cave had stolen light, but it had also lit a fire. At first the flickers were no more than pinpricks, tiny glows seeping from cracks in the cave walls. But the longer Amara stayed, the stronger they became, until the whole chamber shimmered with a restless light. She sat still watching them dance. They were not flames like those in a hearth. They were alive, moving with intention, curling in shapes that almost resembled faces, wings or hands. Her breath quickened. The stories had spoken of this, spirits of fire older than the village itself, hidden deep within the earth. To see them was to stand at the edge of a trial, one that few survived. The first spirit slithered toward her like smoke, its glow sharp as a coal. It hissed a question that seemed to enter her ears and her bones at once. "What is fire to you, comfort or curse?" Amara's lips trembled, but she answered. "It is both. It warms the weak and devours the careless. I have seen it save us and I have seen it destroy fields. Fire is life when respected, death when ignored." The spirit's glow deepened and it melted back into the wall. Another emerged, larger, its form rising like a torch. It spoke with a voice that crackled. "If you carried our flame, would you burn your enemies? Would you scorch the ones who betrayed you?" Amara closed her eyes. Naki's face burned in her mind, twisted with envy. The hands of her stepsisters shoving her into darkness. The hunger she had swallowed, the humiliation she had borne. Anger surged sharp as a blade. For a heartbeat she wanted nothing more than to see them choke on smoke and ash. But she forced herself to breathe. "I will not carry fire for vengeance alone," she whispered. "If I burn only to harm, I will become like those who wronged me. I will carry it to protect, to warn, to remind." The spirit flared brightly, then drifted upward, scattering sparks like stars. A third spirit appeared, vast and shifting, its glow filling every crevice. Its voice rumbled like a storm. "Fire consumes. Fire remakes. Will you let it consume you? Will you surrender who you were?" This question pierced deeper than the others. Amara thought of her old self, the girl who bowed, who endured, who wept silently in the shadows. She thought of her mother's gentle songs, of the stories that promised strength could grow even in hardship. Could she let go of her fear? Could she allow the fire to change her into someone unknown? Her body trembled, but she whispered into the glow, "Yes. If I must burn to rise, then let me burn. Take what is weak in me and leave only what endures." The spirit swirled, rising and falling, until the entire cave roared with light. Flames licked the walls but did not scorch. Heat surged through her palms, her chest, her throat, as if her blood itself had become fire. Visions poured over her like waves. Forests aflame, villages destroyed, children warming their hands by safe hearths, warriors carrying torches into darkness. She saw destruction and renewal, cruelty and mercy, all bound in one truth: fire was not for her alone. It belonged to the world, and those who carried it must choose each moment whether to destroy or to heal. When the visions faded, she fell to her knees, gasping, her skin slick with sweat. The cave was silent again, save for a faint hum in the stone. But she felt the difference inside her. The weakness that had gnawed her had burned away. What remained was sharper, steadier. Her fear was not gone, but it no longer ruled her. In her palms, tiny flames flickered, curling without pain. She lifted her hands, awe and terror mingling in her chest. For the first time she understood the spirit's trial. The cave had not been her grave but her forge. Amara was no longer only the girl who endured. She was something more, something fire had claimed and remade. The silence after the trial was heavy, but it was not empty. The hum in the stone seemed to echo inside Amara's chest, beating in rhythm with her heart. She stood slowly, her legs shaking, and pressed her palm against the cave wall. The rock was cool, yet the flames in her hand did not die. Instead, they softened, folding into her skin as if they had always belonged there. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness. What once had seemed like shadows now shimmered faintly, every crack and ridge alive with a hidden glow. The cave was no longer only a place of fear. It was alive, a dwelling of power that had chosen to let her live. Amara whispered to herself, "I am not the same." Her voice did not sound the same either. It carried weight as if every syllable held the echo of fire. She cupped her hands and with a thought, coaxed a spark to life. A small flame bloomed, dancing gently. For a moment she simply stared, both terrified and reverent. This was not a weapon like the blade that had cut her palm, nor was it the cruel hunger of the fire that devoured huts. It was a living thing that bent itself to her will. She knelt again, drawing the flame across the dirt. As it moved, it left no scorch, but the earth glowed faintly where it touched, forming patterns, circles, spirals, lines that twisted into shapes she did not know yet somehow understood. These were not idle marks. They were the language of the spirits, binding memory into earth. Her fingers traced one spiral and she felt knowledge bloom within, protection. Another, woven like braided reeds, spoke of endurance. A third, sharp-edged and jagged, pulsed with warning. The fire had not only changed her, it had given her the tools to speak with it, to shape its nature. She thought of her village, of the children, her stepsisters, her stepmother. A part of her longed to return immediately, to show them what they had unleashed. To watch fear replace their cruelty. Yet another part of her resisted. What she carried was too new, too fragile. If she stepped into the village with vengeance, she might lose the very strength she had just gained. Amara closed her eyes. Her mother's voice rose in her memory, a lullaby sung when the nights had been long and the food scarce. "The fire is not yours to hoard, nor yours to waste. Carry it wisely, child, for others will gather to its warmth." She realized then, this transformation was not for her alone. It was for all who would need its flame. The cave trembled, and from a crack in the ceiling a narrow shaft of sunlight fell. Thought. She had survived the night, the trial, the fire's judgment. With steady breath she walked toward the light. Each step felt heavier and freer at once. By the time she reached the mouth of the cave, the sky was a pale gold, the world stretching wide and new before her. Birds scattered into the air, startled by her presence. She paused on the threshold, the cave at her back, the village beyond the hills. Her reflection wavered faintly in a pool of water nearby, and she hardly recognized herself. Her eyes glowed faintly as though embers rested behind them. Her scars, old and new, no longer looked like wounds. They looked like marks of survival, etched with meaning. Amara lifted her hand. Flames licked her skin, obedient and calm. She clenched her fist and they vanished. For the first time in her life she felt not powerless but whole. The girl who had been cast aside in shame was gone. In her place stood something more, someone fire had remade. The world outside waited, unknowing. And Amara stepped forward, ready to carry her flame into it. The sun fell and the hills lay quiet under a shroud of night. In the distance, the village of Ashen Hills glimmered faintly, its hearths small and scattered, like stars about to flicker out. Few dared linger outside after dark. Stories of spirits walking the paths kept them close to their fires. But that night something else stirred. The cave mouth yawned open behind Amara as if the stone itself had bowed to her release. She stepped out barefoot, her shadow stretching unnaturally long in the moonlight. In her hands burned a soft, steady flame, not consuming, not wild, but alive. It clung to her palms without smoke, without ash, as if the fire itself knew her as kin. Each step down the mountain was a test. The fire licked her skin but did not harm her. Her body felt both heavy with memory and weightless with purpose. She moved like a spirit descending, not a mortal girl returning. At the village edge the dogs barked first. Their cries pierced the night, a warning that carried to every hut. Doors creaked open. Faces appeared in the glow of torchlight. Murmurs rose. "It is her." "No, it cannot be. She vanished, days ago, weeks ago." The villagers gathered, men clutching spears, women clutching children, their eyes wide with fear. What walked toward them was no longer only Amara. Her eyes reflected flame, her skin cast in shifting glow. Around her, the very air seemed to pulse with heat. Her stepmother was among the first to see clearly. The woman froze, her mouth open as if the night had pulled the breath from her. At her side, Amara's stepsisters clung to each other, trembling. They whispered the word the villagers would carry for generations: Firebearer. Amara stopped at the center of the square, where the dying embers of the communal fire smoldered. She bent low, cupped the coals and breathed into them. Her flame leapt from her palms into the pit. In an instant the fire roared, brighter than it had in years. Sparks spiraled into the sky. The villagers gasped, some falling to their knees, others crossing their arms in protection. One of the elders stepped forward, staff in hand, his voice quivering. "Child, no, woman of flame, what have you brought upon us?" Amara's gaze swept over them. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight like thunder rolling through stone. "I bring no curse. I bring the fire that would not let me die." Gasps rippled. Some bowed their heads, reverent. Others stepped back, fearful. For in every story the villagers had told, no mortal had returned from the caves of the mountain. Then from the crowd 2 figures pressed forward, her brothers. Their faces were pale in the firelight, their eyes darting between Amara and the villagers. They forced smiles that did not reach their eyes. "Sister," the eldest cried, "we thought you lost. We searched and mourned, truly we did." The younger added quickly, "Yes, all this while we prayed for your safe return." Their voices were oily, smooth with practiced lies. But the fire in Amara's palms stirred restlessly. Flames curled higher, twisting like serpents tasting the air. The villagers noticed. A hush fell over them. The truth had not yet been spoken, but the fire seemed to know it. Amara looked at her brothers. For a long time she said nothing. The only sound was the hiss of burning wood, the pop of sparks. Then, in a voice low but sharp as a blade, she said, "The fire does not lie." The ground beneath her brothers darkened, ash forming where no flame had touched. Their smiles faltered. Sweat beaded on their foreheads. The villagers began to murmur again, suspicion threading through the crowd. Her stepmother stepped forward, shaking, her voice rising shrill. "Do not believe her tricks. She is not the girl who left us. She is something else now, something dangerous." But even as she spoke, the fire from the hearth leapt higher, answering Amara's unspoken will. Its glow illuminated the fear on her brothers' faces, the guilt etched into their trembling hands. The villagers saw. They understood. Whispers spread like wind. They sent her away. They betrayed her. The fire shows us. The judgment had begun, not from Amara's lips alone, but from the flames themselves. As the moon reached its highest point, the square glowed brighter than day. Every eye was on Amara, every breath held in suspense. She stood tall, her shadow vast, her flame steady. She had returned. Not as the abandoned girl. Not as the sister left to die. But as firebearer, a being who carried both truth and terror in her hands. The night would not forget it. Nor would the village. The fire in the square burned higher than any had seen in years. Sparks swirled like restless spirits, rising into the night sky, carried on a wind that seemed to come from nowhere. The villagers stood frozen in a circle, their faces lit by the shifting glow. All eyes were on Amara. All ears strained for her next word. Her brothers stood opposite her, side by side but not close enough to touch. Their clothes, once neat, now clung damp to their skin with sweat. Every flicker of flame painted their fear more clearly than words could. Still they tried to hold their composure. "We are innocent," the elder brother declared, his voice cracking under the weight of silence. He spread his hands, forcing a trembling smile. "We loved our sister, prayed for her, feared for her when she vanished. You cannot believe she accuses us of such cruelty." The younger brother nodded rapidly. "Yes. These are the lies of spirits, not truth. The cave has filled her with illusions. You must not trust her, she is no longer what she was." But even as the words left their lips, the flames stirred. The fire leapt toward them, a sudden hiss and crack, scorching the ground at their feet. They stumbled back with cries, their masks breaking for a heartbeat. Gasps broke out among the villagers. Mothers clutched their children closer. Men shifted uneasily with spears in hand but did not raise them. No one moved against Amara. Instead, they watched the flames, waiting, as if the fire itself had become the true judge of what was hidden. Amara's voice was steady, quiet but commanding enough that every ear bent to it. "You left me to die in darkness. You sealed the cave with your own hands. You told the village I vanished. But the fire remembers. It remembers the stone scraping shut. It remembers your laughter fading as you walked away. Her brothers' faces contorted, caught between denial and panic. The elder tried again, desperate, his words a tangle. She lies. Can you not see? These tricks are meant to turn you against blood. Will you trust fire over kin? But even as he spoke, the fire shifted. Shapes formed within the flames, two figures broad of shoulder lifting a stone, shoving it into place. The vision was clear enough that even children gasped in recognition. The flames showed what had happened, their memory etched in light. The younger brother's knees buckled. He stammered, his voice breaking. It is a trick, spirits can deceive. But no one listened. The villagers' murmurs rose into cries, then shouts. They betrayed her. They sought her death. Blood against blood. The elder of the village, his staff planted firm in the earth, stepped forward. His voice shook, not from weakness but from awe. The fire itself has spoken. And when fire speaks, lies turn to ash. What judgment remains for those who would murder their own blood? The brothers looked around wildly. No one stepped forward to shield them. Not even their mother. The stepmother stood rooted, pale as ash, her hands trembling at her sides. She had no words of defense, no cries of protest. Amara stepped closer, her palms still aglow. Flames rippled outward from her hands, licking the dirt, circling her brothers. They yelped, stumbling back until the circle of fire closed them in. The heat was unbearable, though the flames did not yet touch their flesh. Sweat poured down their faces. They screamed apologies, desperate now, voices high with panic. Sister, forgive us. We were blinded by envy, we did not mean. It was a test, a cruel jest not meant to. But the fire roared at their words, rising taller, hotter, a wall of flame that blotted out the night sky. Their lies curled into smoke, exposed by the very element they had mocked when they cast her into the cave. Amara raised her hands. The villagers held their breath, waiting to see if she would loose the fire upon them, burn them to ash for their betrayal. Children buried their faces into their mothers' skirts. Old men clutched their staffs tighter. The stepmother sank to her knees, whispering prayers under her breath. The brothers cried out again, their voices ragged, raw. Mercy, mercy, sister. Do not let us burn. Amara's face was unreadable. She felt the fire hum inside her, begging to consume, to punish, to cleanse. Yet she also felt the eyes of her people, wide with fear and hope. If she chose only vengeance, would she become no different from those who had abandoned her? The flames around her brothers trembled, wavered, then lowered just enough to leave them trembling, unharmed but scorched by fear. The ground where they stood was blackened, the shape of their guilt etched into the earth. Amara spoke, her voice like embers stirred by the wind. The fire has judged. You will live but never again as brothers. You will bear the mark of ash wherever you walk, a reminder of the truth you tried to bury. And as she spoke, the fire left behind its brand, dark streaks across their arms, hands and faces, as if smoke had seeped into their skin. No washing would remove it. The villagers gasped, some recoiling, others murmuring in awe. The brothers fell to their knees, shamed, marked, undone. The elder of the village bowed his head to Amara. The fire has chosen you. The truth is yours to wield. We will no longer doubt. Around the circle, the people followed, bowing, bending, some falling to their knees, not to her as a girl they had once known but to something greater. Amara lowered her hands. The fire dimmed but did not vanish. It curled softly in her palms, a living thing, a companion. She looked at her people, then at her brothers crumpled and broken before her. Her heart was heavy, but her purpose was clear. The night had passed its judgment. And so had she. The night had been heavy with fire and fear, but dawn came soft, spilling gold over the ashen hills. Mist rose from the river, curling like smoke, and the village stirred in uneasy silence. The people had not forgotten the sight of Amara standing in the square, fire in her hands, judgment in her eyes. She had not slept. She sat on the hill above the village, the fire flickering calmly between her palms, listening to its hum. The flames no longer roared with anger but pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, patient. They were hers now and yet not hers, companions, guides, reminders of the cost of betrayal and the strength born from survival. The villagers gathered at the base of the hill. They came with offerings, bowls of grain, jugs of water, lengths of cloth, all laid at her feet. Some came in reverence, bowing low, whispering her name with awe. Others came with fear, keeping their distance, their eyes downcast. Children clung to their mothers, peeking at her with wide eyes. The elder approached, staff in hand. His voice was solemn, but there was no doubt in it. You are no longer merely a daughter of this village. You are firebearer, protector, seer, judge. The fire has chosen you, and through you, it has spoken. Amara looked down at him, then at the faces gathered behind him. She saw the awe, the terror, the hunger for guidance. She also saw the marks of hardship, the cracked lips, the thin arms, the tired eyes of those who had lived too long under drought and suspicion. She remembered what it was to be powerless, to be unheard. Her voice was steady as she spoke. If I am firebearer, then I will not rule by fear. The fire is not only destruction. It is warmth, it is light, it is life. It reveals truth, but it also gives strength. We will rebuild this village not with envy and lies, but with flame that does not consume. A murmur swept through the crowd, some gasping, others nodding. Hope flickered where before there had been only dread. But her brothers, kneeling apart, heads bowed, their skin marked with ash that no water could cleanse, lifted their eyes. Their faces were drawn with shame and fear. The elder turned to Amara. And what of these two? They sought your death. Do they deserve to walk free? The villagers waited, breath held. Some whispered for punishment, others for mercy. All eyes were on her. Amara rose slowly, the fire glowing brighter as if in response. She walked to her brothers who dared not move. They trembled, unable to meet her gaze. For a long moment she said nothing, only studied them. Boys who had once been her companions in childhood, now men twisted by jealousy, undone by their own cruelty. She spoke at last, her words carrying across the square. The fire has marked them. Their guilt is written on their skin for all to see. They will not burn, but neither will they walk unshamed. Let them remain here, not as brothers to me, but as servants to the flame. They will build, they will work, they will feed the hearth that warms the people they once betrayed. Their lives will not be taken, but their freedom will be bound by duty. The brothers shuddered, relief and dread tangled in their faces. The villagers nodded, murmuring approval. Mercy, yes, but not without weight. Justice tempered by purpose. Amara raised her hands and the fire leapt skyward, casting light across the waking day. She turned to the villagers. This fire is not mine alone. It is ours. Every child will learn to tend it, every family will carry it in their homes. It will burn in the center of the village, not as a weapon but as a promise. As long as the flame lives, so shall we. The elder bowed deeply and the people followed, bending knee not out of fear but reverence. Children stepped forward first, their small hands reaching for the light. Amara knelt, touching the flame gently to their torches, which sparked to life without smoke or ash. Laughter bubbled from their lips, pure and unafraid, carrying across the square. Soon the adults joined, each taking fire from her hands, lighting their hearths anew. A chain of flames spread through the village, each home touched by her gift. The air filled with warmth and brightness, not wild, not destructive, but alive, steady, hopeful. For the first time in years, the village of Ashen Hills glowed not with dying embers but with a fire that promised renewal. Amara stood at the center, her shadow stretching long in the morning light. She was no longer the girl betrayed, no longer the daughter silenced, no longer the sister cast aside. She was fire-bearer, the keeper of truth, the giver of flame, the protector of her people. And as the sun rose higher, its light mingling with the fire she carried, the people lifted their voices in a single cry of honor, awe, and belonging. From that dawn forward, children were told to light their torches from hers, and stories spread of the girl who walked into darkness and returned with fire in her hands. A girl whose suffering became strength, whose betrayal became legacy. The flames that once threatened to consume her now burned eternal, not in destruction but in life.